Ever peered into a seemingly empty tank or maybe a quiet tunnel on a construction site and wondered what unseen dangers might be lurking inside?
That's a really, really important thought to have. What just looks like, an enclosed space can actually hide some very real, potentially fatal hazards.
Absolutely. Welcome, everyone, to the Construction Safety Pro channel.
Glad you could join us.
Yeah. And hey, if you're serious about staying safe, keeping up to date on the best practices in construction, definitely make sure to subscribe.
And hit that notification bell, too.
Right, so you don't miss any crucial deep dives, just like this one we're doing today.
And today we are really zeroing in on a critical area, confined spaces.
Yep. We'll be digging into OSHA's specific rules. That's subpart AA of Part 1926, right?
That's the one. Specifically sections 1926.1202 for definitions and 1926.1203 covering general requirements.
Okay, and for the learner out there, our goal today is pretty straightforward.
We want to give you a clear picture of what is a confined space in construction.
And how to spot the ones that need a permit before anyone goes in.
Plus, the essential steps employers have to take to keep workers safe.
We're going to break down the key terms, the requirements, basically get you up to speed on this potentially life-saving info quickly and thoroughly.
Exactly. Let's dive in.
Okay, so when OSHA talks about a confined space, what are the absolute must-have characteristics? What defines it?
Well, the standard, 1926.1202, it lays out three essential features.
Three things.
Okay? First, the space has to be large enough for someone to physically get their body into it.
So you got to be able to actually enter it.
Right, your whole body. We're not talking about just reaching an arm in.
Makes sense. What's number two?
Second, it has to have limited or restricted means for entry and exit.
Limited or restricted. Okay. What does that actually look like beyond just, say, a small manhole?
Good question. It's broader than just the opening size. Think about trip hazards right at the entrance.
Oh, okay. Like loose gravel or something.
Exactly. Or maybe poor lighting inside, making it hard to see where you're stepping, slippery floors, maybe a ladder that's partially blocked.
Anything that makes getting in or maybe more importantly, getting out quickly difficult.
Precisely. Especially in an emergency, it complicates safe passage.
Got it. So accessibility is key. And the third characteristic?
The third one is that the space is not designed for continuous employee occupancy.
Meaning it's not a regular work area.
Right. It's not an office, not a control room. It's a place you go into temporarily for a specific task, then you get out.
Okay. Large enough to enter, tricky to get in or out of, and not meant for hanging out in.
Got it.
Now, what takes it from that to a permit-required confined space, a permit space? What are those extra danger flags?
Yeah, this is where it gets really critical. It becomes a permit space if it has one or more of four potential hazards.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first big one is the potential for a hazardous atmosphere.
Hazardous atmosphere.
Oh.
That sounds, well, bad. What falls out of that?
It covers a lot. Not enough oxygen, or actually too much oxygen, which is a fire risk.
Okay.
Flammable gases or vapors that could ignite. Combustible dust, like from sawing or grinding, in concentrations that could explode.
Wow.
Or toxic fumes or chemicals above the safe exposure limits. Anything that could harm you immediately or cause health problems down the line.
And it's not always obvious stuff, right? Like welding fumes could use up oxygen.
Exactly. Or even something like decomposing organic material releasing methane or hydrogen sulfide. Hidden dangers.
Okay, so a bad atmosphere is a major trigger. What's number two?
Second is the potential for engulfment.
Engulfment, you mean like being buried?
Precisely. Think of a silo with grain or a bin full of sand or gravel. If someone's inside, the material could shift and, well, bury them very quickly. Suffocation risk.
That's a terrifying thought. Okay, so hazardous atmosphere, potential engulfment. What else?
Third is an internal configuration, the shape inside, where an entrant could get trapped or asphyxiated.
House?
The standard mentions inwardly converging walls, or maybe floors that slope down sharply to a smaller area, like a funnel or a hopper.
Ah, I see. You could slide down and get wedged.
Right, and get stuck in a way that you can't breathe or climb out.
Okay, that makes sense. And the fourth condition?
The fourth is a kind of catch-all, but it's really important. Any other recognized serious safety or health hazard.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, it could be exposed live electrical parts, extreme temperatures, heat or cold, unguarded machinery inside, maybe even a risk of falling from a height within the space itself.
So basically, any other serious danger that's not covered by the first three.
Exactly. If a confined space has any one of those four, bad air, engulfment risk, hazardous ship, or other serious danger, it's a permit space, period.
And if it meets the first three criteria for a confined space, but doesn't have any of those four immediate dangers?
Then it's classified as a non-permit confined space. Still needs awareness, but doesn't trigger the full, strict permit procedures.
Okay, that distinction is much clearer now. Permit versus non-permit. Let's talk responsibility. Who figures this stuff out on site? Who has to identify these spaces?
Right, good question. Section 1926.1203A puts the responsibility squarely on each employer. They have to ensure a competent person identifies all confined spaces where their employees might work.
Before work starts.
Absolutely, before work begins. Crucial first step.
And this competent person, we hear that term a lot. What makes someone competent for confined spaces?
Well, the definition back in 1926.1202 says it's someone who can recognize existing and predictable hazards related to confined spaces.
Okay, recognition is key.
But critically, they also need the authority to take prompt corrective measures to eliminate those hazards.
So knowledge and power to act.
Exactly. Can't just spot the problem. They need to be able to initiate the fix.
So this competent person finds all potential confined spaces, and then they have to evaluate each one to see if it needs a permit.
Precisely. Subsection A says they evaluate it through consideration and evaluation of the elements of that space, including testing as necessary. They systematically check for those four permit-required conditions we just talked about.
Okay. And let's say they do find permit spaces. What does the employer have to do immediately, according to 1926.1203B?
Two main things right away. First, they got to inform exposed employees about the existence, location, and dangers of these spaces.
How do they usually do that? Signs.
Signs are a big part of it, yeah. Posting danger signs at each permit space entrance.
And OSHA suggests specific wording, doesn't it?
It does. The note mentions things like, danger permit required confined space, do not enter. Something clear and unmistakable.
Makes sense. Keep it simple and direct. What's the other communication requirement?
They also need to inform the employees' authorized representatives, like a union rep and the controlling contractor on the site.
And importantly, not just by posting a sign, right?
Correct. It needs to be timely and through means other than just posting. Ensures everyone who needs to know knows, especially crucial on multi-employer sites.
Yeah, you need to reach everyone involved. Okay, now what if an employer finds a permit space, but they know their own team won't be going in there? What's the rule then? That's in 1926.1203C, right?
Right. If their employees won't enter, the employer still has to take effective measures to prevent them from accidentally going in.
Effective measures sounds like more than just a sign.
Definitely. Could be locking the entrance, installing a physical barricade, something that makes entry impossible for unauthorized personnel. Plus, they still have to do the notification piece we just discussed.
Got it. Prevent entry. But what if the employer does intend for their employees to enter a permit space? That kicks things up a notch, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Now you're talking about 1926.1203D. If employees will enter, the employer must develop and implement a written permit space program.
A written program. Why is putting it in writing so important? Seems like extra paperwork.
It might seem that way, but it's crucial for consistency. It ensures everyone follows the same safe procedures every single time.
Okay, consistency. What else?
It's a clear communication tool, defines roles, responsibilities, hazards, controls. It's also a record, something you can review, learn from, improve upon, and it's vital for training.
Right, so clarity, consistency, and improvement. And this written plan, it needs to be accessible.
Totally. Can't be locked in a filing cabinet somewhere. The standard says it must be available for inspection by employees and their reps before and during entry operations. Transparency is key.
Okay, so written program needed for planned entry. But I think I remember something about alternate entry procedures. When can those be used instead of the full permit program?
Yes, that's section 1926.1203. An employer can use these alternate procedures, which lets them bypass some parts of the full permit program.
Okay.
But only if a very specific, very strict set of conditions are met first. It's definitely not a shortcut or a loophole.
Not just an easy way out.
Gotcha.
So what are these strict conditions?
Okay, first and foremost, the employer has to demonstrate that all physical hazards in the space are completely eliminated or isolated.
All physical ones.
Okay.
Like electrical, mechanical.
Exactly. Locked out, blinded off, physically blocked. Done through engineering controls, not just relying on PPE. The only potential hazard left can be the atmosphere.
Okay, physical hazards dealt with. What's next?
Second, they must prove that continuous forced air ventilation by itself is enough to keep the atmosphere safe for the entire entry.
Just ventilation alone.
Yes. And crucially, they also have to show that if that ventilation fails, people inside can still get out safely before the atmosphere becomes hazardous.
That seems like a high bar to clear. How do they prove that? They can't just assume, right?
No, absolutely not. Which leads to the third condition. They need solid monitoring and inspection data to back it all up.
Data. Actual measurements.
Right. Objective evidence, usually from air monitoring and hazard assessments, proving the physical hazards are gone and the ventilation works as claimed.
What if they need to go in just to get that data in the first place?
Good point. If an initial entry is needed just to collect that data, then that initial entry must follow the full permit program requirements. You can't use the alternate rules to see if you qualify for the alternate rules.
Huh. Okay, that makes sense. Use the full rules to justify using the simpler ones later. What else?
Fifth condition, documentation and communication. They have to carefully document how they determined the hazards were eliminated, dissillated, and all the supporting data for the ventilation.
And share it.
Yes, make it available to every employee entering under these procedures and their reps. Everyone needs to know the basis for safety.
Transparency again. Okay, is there a sixth condition?
Yes, the final one is that the entry itself, using these alternate procedures, must follow a specific, detailed set of requirements laid out in paragraph 2 of the standard.
So even with alternate procedures, there's still a strict checklist for the actual entry.
Absolutely. It's not casual entry by any means.
What are some key things on that checklist?
Well, for starters, before you even remove the entrance cover, you have to eliminate any unsafe conditions like pressure buildup.
Okay.
Then, as soon as the cover's off, the opening must be immediately guarded, railing, cover, barrier to prevent falls or things falling in.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Safety right from the start. What about checking the air?
Crucial. Before anyone goes in, test the internal atmosphere. Calibrated, direct reading instrument.
Is there a specific order for testing?
Yes. First for oxygen content, then flammable gases and vapors, then potential toxic contaminants, in that order.
Oxygen, flammables, toxics. Got it.
Yeah.
And workers can watch this testing.
Yes. Any entrant or their rep has the right to observe the pre-entry testing.
And once inside, the atmosphere has to stay safe, obviously.
Unequivocally. No hazardous atmosphere allowed at any time while an employee is inside. That links back to the continuous ventilation requirement.
How does that ventilation need to work exactly?
It has to be running before entry to clear out any bad air. It needs to flow to the immediate work areas, run continuously until everyone's out, and use clean air from a safe source.
Can't just blow dirty air in.
Definitely not. And you need ongoing atmospheric monitoring while people are inside.
Continuous monitoring. Always.
It's required unless the employer can show the equipment isn't available or that periodic checks are frequent enough to be safe.
And if they use continuous monitors.
Need an alarm to warn entrants immediately if something goes wrong, or an attendant watching the monitor closely enough to allow for evacuation.
And periodic checks need to be often enough to catch problems.
Yes, confirming the ventilation is working. And again, entrants can observe this monitoring too.
What happens if, despite all this, a hazard is detected during an alternate entry?
Immediate evacuation. Everyone out.
Okay, then what?
The employer must investigate why it happened, fix the problem, and ensure it won't happen again before anyone re-enters.
Investigate. Correct. Verify. Got it. Any other key safety points for alternate entry?
Need a safe way in and out. If using a hoist for people, it must be specifically designed or approved for that by a registered professional engineer.
Right. Can't just use any old winch.
Exactly. And finally, right before entry, there needs to be a written certification.
A piece of paper.
Signed and dated, confirming the space is safe for entry and all the pre-entry steps were done, and that certification must be available to the entrants.
Okay, so even the alternate route is pretty rigorous. Lots of checks and documentation. Now let's flip back to non-permit spaces. What if things change? Or someone suspects the initial check wasn't quite right?
That's covered in 1926.1203 RCAS. If conditions change use, configuration, anything that might add a hazard, or if there's doubt about the initial evaluation, the employer must have a competent person reevaluate the space.
And it could become a permit space then.
Absolutely. If the reevaluation finds one of those 4 permit-required conditions, it gets reclassified, and all the permit space rules kick in.
So classifications aren't set in stone. Good to know. Can it go the other way? Can a permit space be downgraded to non-permit?
Yes, but it's tough. That's 1926.1203G. It can only be reclassified to non-permit if a competent person determines all atmospheric hazards are gone and all other hazards are eliminated or isolated.
And the key phrase here is,
Without entry into the space.
without entry. Why is that so important?
Because entering a permit space is inherently risky. Doing the hazard removal from outside avoids exposing anyone during that process.
But what if you can't fix it from the outside?
There's an exception. If it's truly infeasible to eliminate or isolate hazards without entering, then you must enter under the full permit program to do the work.
Ah, okay. So you use the permit system to make it safe enough to potentially reclassify later.
Exactly. Once the hazards are controlled during that permitted entry, and only as long as they stay controlled, then it can be reclassified.
And there was a specific point about ventilation for reclassification, right?
Oh, yes. Very important note. Just controlling the atmosphere with ventilation does not count as eliminating the hazard for reclassification purposes.
So you can't just blow air in and call it non-permit.
Correct. That falls under alternate entry procedures within the permit system. For reclassification, the source of the hazard must be gone or blocked.
Big difference. What else is needed for reclassification?
Documentation. The employer needs a written certification detailing why they determined all hazards were eliminated or isolated. Signed by the competent person, dated, location specified.
And available to employees.
Yep, available to anyone entering or their reps.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what if hazards pop up again after it's been reclassified as non-permit?
Simple rule in, G4. Everyone gets out immediately.
That.
Reevaluate, probably reclassify it back to a permit space, and follow all those procedures again.
So, constant vigilance. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Construction sites often have multiple employers. This seems like a recipe for confusion with permit spaces. How does OSHA handle communication and coordination? That's in 1926.1203 Edition I, isn't it?
It is, and it's absolutely vital.
Yeah.
The standard clearly lays out roles for the host employer and the controlling contractor.
Okay, define those first. Host employer is?
The owner or manager of the property where the work's happening.
That's controlling contractor.
The employer with overall responsibility for the construction project on that site could be the general contractor, construction manager.
Sometimes they might be the same entity.
Yes, the host could also be the controller if they're managing the construction directly.
Okay. So what's the host employer's job regarding permit spaces?
Before entry work starts, the host must give the controlling contractor all the info they have about permit spaces on site.
Like locations, hazards.
Exactly. Locations, known hazards, any precautions already taken. Basically share their site knowledge.
Okay, host shares info. What does the controlling contractor do with it?
They gather that info, add anything they know, and then they have to pass it on.
To who?
To every company, every entry employer whose people will actually go into the permit spaces.
Makes sense. Anyone else?
Yes, critically, they also have to inform any other company on site whose work could potentially create a hazard inside a permit space, even if that company isn't entering it themselves.
Ah, like someone welding nearby could affect the atmosphere inside.
Precisely. They act as the central communication hub for these risks.
Okay. What about the entry employer? The company actually sending people in. What are their communication duties?
Before they start, they need to get all that hazard info from the controlling contractor. And importantly, they need to tell the controlling contractor about their specific permit program and any hazards they might anticipate or create during their work.
So it's a two-way street, information flowing both ways.
Absolutely essential.
What if you have multiple companies working in different permit spaces at the same time or doing work nearby that could affect things?
Then the controlling contractor and all the entry employers involved must coordinate their operations.
Coordinate how?
To prevent conflicts, like ensuring work schedules don't overlap dangerously, or that activities in one area don't create hazards in another permit space. Careful planning.
Coordination prevents nasty surprises. Makes sense. What about after the work is done? Is communication still needed?
Yes, there's a debriefing process. The controlling contractor needs to talk to each entry employer after their work is finished.
Oh, what?
About the permit program they use, any hazards they found, any hazards they might have left behind or created.
Okay. And the entry employer tells the controller too?
Yes, they share their experiences back. And then the controlling contractor relays all that debriefing information back to the original host employer.
Closes the loop. So everyone learns from the experience.
Exactly. Continuous improvement cycle.
What if there isn't a designated controlling contractor? Sometimes it's just the property owner hiring contractors directly.
Good question. Section 1926.1203 covers that. If there's no controlling contractor, then the host employer or whoever arranged for the entry work takes on all those controlling contractor responsibilities.
So someone always has that coordination role. Accountability is clear.
That's the intent.
Okay, this is great detail. To really nail this down, maybe we should quickly recap some of those key definitions from 1926.1202 we've been using. How about acceptable entry conditions?
Sure. Those are the conditions that must exist inside a permit space before entry is authorized. Basically, it means it's safe enough for someone to go in and work without being hurt by the hazards the space is known for.
Got it. Safe to enter. And the attendant, what's their main job again?
The attendant stays outside the permit space. Their job is to monitor the entrance inside, keep in touch with them, check conditions, and, importantly, initiate rescue if needed. They have specific duties listed in Section 1926.1209.
The eyes and ears on the outside. Makes sense. Who's an authorized entrant?
Simple enough, an employee who's been given permission by the entry supervisor to go into the permit space.
Okay. And we keep mentioning the competent person. Remind us of the key power.
Key thing is not just knowing the hazards, but having the authority to take prompt corrective action to eliminate them. Knowledge plus action.
Right. The power to fix things.
Yeah.
And that difference between controlling contractor and host employer.
Host employer owns or manages the property. Controlling contractor has overall responsibility for the construction work itself on that site. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes not.
Okay. And entry employer.
That's the company whose employees are actually going into the permit space. They decide to send their people in.
And the entry supervisor sounds like the person in charge during the entry.
Exactly. The qualified person could be the employer, foreman, crew chief responsible for checking conditions before entry, authorizing entry, overseeing the operation, and deciding when to terminate the entry if things go wrong.
Can one person fill multiple roles? Like be the supervisor and the attendant?
Yes, the standard says one person can serve multiple roles, supervisor, attendant, entrant, if they're properly trained and equipped for each role they're taking on.
Okay, multitasking possible, but only if qualified. Let's revisit hazard and hazardous atmosphere one more time. They're so fundamental.
Okay, a hazard is either physical, like falls, machinery, or a hazardous atmosphere.
A hazardous atmosphere.
That's air that could kill, incapacitate, impair self-rescue, injure, or make someone acutely ill. Specific triggers include flammables at 10% or more of the LFL.
Lower flammable limit.
Right. Airborne combustible dust, thick enough to obscure vision at 5 feet. Oxygen below 19.5% or above 23.5%. Toxics above their pale.
Permissible exposure limit.
Yep. Or any other condition that's immediately dangerous to life or health, IDLH.
Serious stuff.
Yeah.
And isolate or isolation. What are practical ways to do that?
It means completely protecting people inside from released energy or material. Methods include blanking or blinding pipelines, removing pipe sections, double block and bleed systems, lockout, hagout on energy sources, or physical barriers.
Basically building a secure bubble inside.
That's a good way to think of it.
We also talked about limited or restricted means for entry or exit being broad.
Yeah, it covers anything hindering movement obstructions, poor lighting, slippery surfaces, awkward configurations, anything making it hard to get in or out, especially with gear on.
Okay. And last ones, test versus monitor and ventilate.
Right. Test or testing is the pre-entry evaluation of hazards by the competent person. Determines if it's safe to go in.
Before anyone enters.
Monitor or monitoring is the ongoing checking of conditions while people are inside, making sure it stays safe.
During the entry.
And ventilate, or ventilation in these rules, means using continuous forced air mechanical systems, properly designed and operated, to control the atmosphere inside.
Continuous mechanical ventilation. Got it. Okay. Those definitions really help pull it all together.
They really are the foundation for applying these rules correctly.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive into OSHA's confined space regulations. It's clear just how critical these steps are for site safety.
Absolutely. Understanding all this identifying spaces, the permit process, alternate procedures, communication, it's not just about checking boxes for compliance.
No, it's really about preventing terrible accidents, protecting workers,
And ultimately saving lives. That's the bottom line.
and for you, the learner. We really hope this breakdown has given you a solid footing on this complex but truly vital topic.
But please remember, this is just our discussion, a starting point. We definitely encourage you to go read the actual OSHA regulations, Subpart AA, Part 1926, to get the full detailed picture.
Definitely. So thinking about your own experiences or maybe questions you still have,
Yeah.
what parts of confined space safety do you find the most challenging? Or maybe what questions popped up during our chat?
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Drop your thoughts, your questions, your insights in the comments below.
Your input is incredibly valuable. It helps everyone learn, and it might even spark ideas for future deep dives.
We really value that interaction.
Well, thank you all so much for tuning in to the Construction Safety Pro channel for this deep dive.
Stay safe out there on every single job.
We'll catch you on the next one.